Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Couper Moorhead, your host. This is After the Buzzer, where we are talking about the Miami Heat having defeated the San Antonio Spurs 128-107, ending a 3-game losing streak. It was an okay game. It was all right. It was okay. Maybe seemed better. We'll talk about some stuff. I'm just kidding. It was a fun game. Really exciting. We saw some new stuff, some fresh stuff, some unique stuff from Eric Spoelstra and the Heat. Things that the fans have been clamoring for, including the two bigs on the court together at the same time. We will talk about that in just a moment. First, I want to talk about something that happened to Tyler Herro, which might be almost as important as the new look lineup the Heat used for a good stretch of this one. As for the game itself, didn't end up being much in terms of a competitive one towards the end. The Spurs were up big early on. When the Heat weren't making any shots, then the Heat started making shots, and the Spurs went from a real threat to not much of a threat at all in the second half. It just happened, with the snap of a finger, and that was it. There wasn't much of a late run. The game wasn't really in question. It was a nice, comfortable, relaxing win in the fourth quarter where everybody else could just focus on the fun stuff and all the dunks and all the threes. Great day for everyone involved. Let's talk about the Herro thing before we get to Bam and Ware. Now, we've been talking about in recent weeks how Herro has earned the respect of defenses, earned the respect of opposing coaches, drawing two players on the ball, doubles, blitzes, long shows, and how that's affected the Heat's offense. Well, the Spurs today did something a little bit different in that they had their rookie guard, defensive standout rookie guard, Stephon Castle, effectively face guarding Tyler Herro from the very first minute of the game. And what that means when I say face guarding, I mean the ball was over here, the rim was over here. If Tyler Herro was right in front of him, Steph Castle was face-to-face with him in his personal space, grabbing his jersey, being physical, nudging him, pushing him, everything, pulling him. No matter where Tyler was, whether Tyler had the ball, whether he didn't have the ball, it didn't matter. Castle was up in his business. And that is the kind of respect that Tyler is earning now. Early on, it didn't look like the Heat were particularly comfortable with it. They were a little disjointed because Herro wasn't involved in the offense. And when the guy who has been the focal point of your offense is not involved in it, it's going to throw you off a little bit. So a little disjointed early on. Tyler only took 2 shots, making neither of them in their first quarter. But as things went on, they grew comfortable with it. They figured out how to work around that coverage. Tyler, in the second half, went 7 of 8 with 4 assists, much more impactful. After the game, I talked to Tyler a little bit. He couldn't remember many teams doing that type of aggressive face guarding before. Some teams have done it a little bit, but not to the extent that the Spurs did it today. Tyler joked after the game, that basically since the moment Tyler got out of his car in the parking garage, Castle was right there, ready to pick him up. And then next time Tyler needs to show up to the Spurs game in his uniform already because he's got to start playing in the parking garage. So Tyler he was good-natured, joking about it. I want to mention and throw to here what Bam Adebayo had to say, because Bam really is the one at that two-man game who can help Tyler when he's being aggressively guarded that much. So here's what Bam had to say about Tyler being face guarded.
Understand it's a different dynamic for him this year. Understand, he is the vocal point of a lot of scouting reports now. So for us, it's understanding that, he's got to play kind of like Steph. You might not get the ball, but go set a screen, go screen somebody. That's how you're going to get yourself open. So me and him had that conversation during the game because he was like, man, what am I supposed to do? And I was like, just go screen for somebody. Literally, if they're going to face guard you, just go screen for somebody. Somebody's going to be open. And, obviously the game laxed up. People relaxed, and now he's getting all his go-to moves. He's getting in his rhythm because, he's a phenomenal shooter. So, you got to respect it.
So, before with the 2 on the ball stuff, it was if you're going to be the guy, if you want to be the guy, you're going to be defended like the guy. That's what happens when you start drawing doubles. Teams treat you like the guy. You're going to draw that much attention. But remember, we've talked a little bit about, including the story I wrote about a month ago about Tyler, about how he wants to play like Steph Curry. He's been watching Steph Curry tape, looking at Steph Curry shot charts, monitoring how the way he plays, his approach. That's how Tyler has approached the season, to play a little bit like Steph, at least stylistically and as within like a holistic approach. Well, other teams have noticed that as well. You've had opposing coaches, J.J. Redick the other day, noting that Tyler is playing like Steph. Well, if you want to play like Steph, you're going to get defended like Steph. And that has been one of the, go-to coverages for teams throughout the years. It doesn't always work because Steph Curry is that great. But especially when you get into the playoffs, they're physical, they're face guarding him, they're trying to take him out of the offense, letting the rest of the team play 4-on-4. If you have the defensive personnel like the Spurs have with Castle, that's what the ask is. Get up in that star player's, space and don't let him breathe. Well, that's what Tyler's starting to see now. And down the road, you're only going to see more of it. If he keeps playing like this, you're going to see more face guarding, especially in the playoffs where teams have a lot of really good defenders to throw at you. Hey, get ready for it. You play that great, you're going to get defended like a great player. The next steps are learning how to take that to your advantage. You don't just want your team playing 4-on-4 as you stand in the corner, just as how the Heat on the other side of the ball haven't wanted to defend 4-on-4 when teams have taken Bam on a switch and put him in a corner. Same idea, just a reverse side of the ball. So learning how to take advantage of it, setting screens, moving off the ball, finding your spots where you can, being timely with cuts, that'll all come in time. Tyler has always taken these coverages. There's been an adjustment period. He counters, he reacts, then the league has to figure out something else. Well, with something like face guarding, that's kind of the ultimate respect in a lot of ways. So we'll see how more of it he sees from here. It's an interesting look for Tyler, but it's exciting because that means that's how well he's playing. He's earned that. Now, Bam Adebayo, Khalil Ware on the floor together, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. It was that kind of a day. You could tell, you could feel the excitement from the fans in the building. You could feel the excitement on social media. People have wanted to see this look. They finally got it. In recent games, Spo has used it a couple times as his end-of-quarter defensive situations. But this was a real good look, a real honest effort to get that pairing together on the floor. Spo went to them in the middle of the second quarter when the Heat were down. By halftime, the Heat were up double digits. And then Spo just said, hey, it's working, so let's stick with it. He started Ware and Bam together in the third quarter. The Heat extended the lead from there. And that's all she wrote. That was the game. The Spurs never really came back from that deficit. Before we get too much more into it, I do want to throw to what Spo said about that look, particularly as it relates to how Bam has to adjust. He can do the defensive side, but how Bam has to adjust on offense and how much of it we might see going forward.
Offensively, look, we've been working on this, behind the scenes, just a little bit each day, just to get them ready, to feel comfortable, to be able to do it and be successful. We don't want to do things and, it fails right away. They'll figure it out. Right now, like defensively, that just looked like it was elite. So if I have to lean into this thing defensively right now for our team to get to another level, I will. And that could be a path. I mean, that we'll dive into this, but that looks like a path where we can find some higher success, at least on one side of the floor, and we'll figure it out on the other side, whatever we have to do.
Now, that doesn't really sound like someone who is going to stop using that pairing. It might depend on matchups. We're not going to see it every game, sort of like the zone coverage. The zone, sometimes you see it 50 possessions, sometimes you see it 10 possessions. Sometimes you might see Bam and Ware together for 2 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes. It'll depend on the game, depend on how well it's working. It's not always going to be gangbusters like it was tonight. But, Spo, if something works, he doesn't just put it back into his pocket for no reason. He's going to use it until someone else makes him stop using it. So we'll see as far as the usage of Bam and Ware together down the road. I would expect to see it a little bit more. We'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. As far as how well it worked, how it looked on defense, look, you've got a huge, tall guy in Ware who can block shots, who's hyper athletic. You've got one of the best defenders in the world in Bam. That's going to work somehow or other. Today it worked with having Ware on Wembanyama, he was in that pick and roll action, which meant Bam got to play off the ball. Not the first time Bam has been able to play, help side defense. Part of the reason the Heat have stopped switching so much in recent years was because teams would get Bam on the switch, as we said earlier, put him in the corner, make Bam a help side defender, but then he wasn't really involved in the play as much, and by the time that happened, the shot clock was usually a little bit shorter. But now Bam, from the minute the possession begins, gets to be a help side defender, gets to pick and choose kind of who he's on, who he's helping off of. So it's a little bit of a more dynamic look for Bam, where he can be more than just a pick and roll defender, where he's had to play more drop coverage in recent years. But also look at it at the flip side of things. Today it was Ware on Wembanyama. That was a fun duel. And, Ware actually ended up outscoring him, as Ware had 25, tying his career high. Wemby had, 21 points on 18 shots. A decent game, but, Ware had a little bit better numbers on the stat sheet. Obviously, Ware's not a focal point defensively the way Wembanyama is, but you get what I'm saying. But in the future, I could see situations where you want Bam. I think when you see those guys, you think Ware's bigger, he's the 5, Bam will be the 4 now. Well, I think there's still times where you might want to see Bam at the 5, because depending on the matchups, depending on who we're talking about, you might still want Bam to be the primary guy involved in those pick and roll actions, whether he's going to switch, whether he's dropping. You want Bam to be disrupting the ball there, because Ware generally is going to play more drop coverage. So you might want Bam up in the pick and roll as a 5-man, and then Ware gets to be the 4, if you want to call it that. It doesn't really matter. We're positionless. It's 2025. Who cares, really? But still, Ware might be the one who gets to play off the ball, who might get to play help side defense, who might get to block some shots. Bam rotated over, made some great plays in that kind of area today at the rim to deter the Spurs during those runs in the second and third. Ware's going to have that opportunity, I would bet, at some point in the future, where Bam will still be on the primary screener, the primary actions, and Ware will get to defend weak side. Either way, you've got a crazy talented defensive rookie in Ware and one of the best defenders in the world in Bam. So that pairing will work on some level. I don't really have any doubts about that. On the offensive side of the ball, we'll see. That's where things get a little bit trickier. Obviously, Spo was saying after the game he felt really good about the defense, and the offense worked today. We'll see how that develops. Bam today got Harrison Barnes on him because Bam became that secondary big, which meant, with Wembanyama on Kalel, Bam gets to have a smaller player on him. Not every team plays as small as the Spurs, but Bam will generally get to have a mismatch to chase, either the guy who's on him, or if Bam is, involved in an action, pick and roll. A lot of teams are going to switch those small when they have two smaller defenders. Teams will just switch those so Bam can get a matchup that he wants to attack. That might be helpful for Bam down the line. The team hasn't been as, aggressive in seeking out mismatch hunting opportunities for Bam this year, but in a lineup like that, where that's something that, a benefit of the lineup is finding Bam mismatches, maybe they'll lean into it more isolations, more post-ups, that sort of thing. We'll see. Today, everything was just flowing so well, and we'll get into why it really worked in a moment. But the offense was just popping. The ball was moving. Ping, ping, ping everywhere. There were lobs thrown. The Spurs, once that initial wave of offense came from the Heat in the middle of the second, the Spurs were just kind of a step behind almost everything. That's why you saw lobs going over everybody's head. Kalel was dunking on everybody. It was that kind of a game. Bam had a couple great lobs. Everything just felt good for the Heat on the offensive side of the ball. But, there will be spacing concerns. They also played those two together with Jimmy Butler on the floor too. But generally speaking, one of Bam or Kalel is going to have to take and make some threes to make that pairing work. Kalel made 1 3 today when Bam, kicked it to him in the corner because, why was Ware open? Because they're helping off him to help on Bam with a mismatch in the post. If Ware can be a consistent shooter and make those shots, that will go a long way towards making that lineup work on the offensive end. We'll see. Again, it's just one game, a small sample size. Exciting to see it happen, but, you got to see more of it to really draw any real conclusions. So that's not cold water. It's just let's wait and see. Let's be excited, but let's see how it works out against different teams. On that note, here are the numbers. With Bam and Khalil on the floor together today, the Heat were plus 23 in 13 minutes, which is about as good as it gets. You can't ask for much more than that. But you always have to be careful with this small sample size lineup data because there's all sorts of things that can happen in there. The first thing you always look at is the three-point shooting because that is the thing that defenses have the least control over. And here's what it looks like. Miami started 0 of 8 from the floor, from 3, 0 of 8 from 3, and then they made 15 of their next 23s. When you do that, you're going to beat most teams. Most lineups are going to work. They finished shooting 54.5% from 3, one of their best three-point shooting games of the year, and that's after starting 0 of 8. So generally speaking, you put those numbers in any game, and any lineup is going to work, especially because on the other side of it, when Bam and Khalil were on the floor, the Heat were 6 of 9 from 3, pretty good, and the Spurs were 1 of 8 from 3, so while also missing a few free throws. So, look, most lineups, you throw those three-point shooting numbers in there, the lineups are going to look amazing. That doesn't mean that the two-big lineup today isn't going to work in the future. It just doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work like this. We just have to wait and see again. And before I know I can hear people saying this, I can hear the reactions because it's the question asked for decades now. If a fan sees a lineup and they really want that lineup to work, they'll say, well, maybe that lineup has that special something, that affects the threes that the other team is getting. Maybe they're really directing the ball to a specific shooter or they're contesting really well. Look, I'll just say that generally isn't the case. We might want it to be true. Usually isn't. Three-point defense, highly variable. Specific lineups, if they can affect that, we need to see it over a much, much larger sample size. It was, 13 minutes today? I'm talking we need to see at least a couple hundred minutes of this group to have an idea of how much effect they have over three-point shooting. But look, that's for down the road. Today it was fun. It was exciting. Everybody, you could feel the energy both from the team, from the fans, from the locker room. It was a feel-good day. It was an exciting day. Tyler Herro saw a new coverage that we're going to have to look at, in the future. And the Heat, Eric Spoelstra, debuted this two-big lineup that fans have been clamoring for, and they got it, and it looked great for one game. Let's see how it goes in the future. For now, this has been After the Buzzer. I'm Couper Moorhead. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you next time. Take care.
Highlights, interviews, live streams. The Heat YouTube channel has it all.